Damn, Frank.
With our smart.
Well, also, like, these notes were very scarce.
Yeah, no, I looked at them recently and I was like, Larry fucked me on that one.
That's all right. We got you covered.
All right. Y'all ready for this?
Yeah, what time do you need to... Wait, where's your machine? Is it in the garage?
Yeah, we'll look at it in a minute.
Yeah. Position's good
Yeah.
for camera and mic. Should be, since nobody else has sat here since me.
You just never know.
Yeah, well, Bennett's been in here f***ing everything up. But who knows? All right, we are on episode 5 of The President's Project here at the Fairview Social Podcast. Today's special guest again is James.
Hola.
Welcome back to the Fairview Social Podcast with The President's Project. And so I was thinking earlier, Mike, that we need to go through the presidents each time. So we got G-dubs.
Recap. So a recap.
Recap,
Okay.
yeah.
G-dubs.
What they call it in the biz, they call it a recap.
I like it.
So we got G-dubs,
Okay.
Johnny A,
Yeah.
and then we got Tommy J,
TJ.
TJ, and then we got J Ma Shorty,
Tiny Monroe.
and then
Tiny Madison.
and today we have J Mo,
J-Mo. I
Which
like
is-
J-Mo.
J-Mo, that's cool.
Yeah.
which is James Monroe. So
Yeah, I like it.
we got two Jameses right in a row.
I like that. J-Mo.
So we're going to talk a little bit about J-Mo, as was with James Madison. There's not a ton of scandalous things.
No.
I think there's more scandals going on in the more recent years of the presidency than it was back then. The biggest scandal that I've seen so far is usually slavery,
Yeah.
and it is scandalous. Don't get me wrong, but I think that back then they didn't see it as scandalous, because everybody had slaves.
So I think that we'll find when we get towards that end of his career, there's a little scandal of how his slaves were treated.
And that's true.
Oh, I didn't read about that. Yeah.
So funny enough, because Mike and I are far from educators on this. We are not professors, nor are we historians, nor are we everyday person that just happens to know something about a president.
No.
So we're kind of learning as we go here.
That's the best part.
Yeah, we need that disclaimer to just be understood for all of these presidential podcasts, because some of this stuff we're looking at notes, but others we're citing off of memory, and we're old, so memory can fail us sometimes.
Sure.
So,
I think the notes are fine.
so pardon our
Yeah.
mishaps and comment if we get something wrong.
But the funny thing is I pulled some data from a website that was National Geographic Kids.
I did see that.
Nice.
I did see that.
Because I'm dumb.
I did see that out there.
and so I don't know. So I think that that'll help us along. So anyway, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, J-Mo.
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 J-Mo for the win. He was the 5th president, as we discussed. He was president from 1817 to 1825, so he had a double.
Yeah.
Everybody had doubles back then.
Almost everybody.
Almost. But the only president to have 12 years.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Look at this. Right off the bat, we're going in.
He's remembered for the era of good feelings, a phrase that sounds peaceful but hides economic pain, slavery tensions, expansion battles, and the birth of America's long-term foreign policy identity. Monroe represents consolidation. The revolution's over. The Constitution survived the war. And now the country asks, what kind of power are we becoming?
Yeah.
Which is interesting right off the bat. And what I've noticed in the past few episodes that we've done is we're kind of comparing things now to how they were back then. But one of the big things that he's known for is the Monroe Doctrine.
Yep.
And it's, if you're comparing it to now, and I know it's always in joke that we have the Monroe Doctrine, which is the Donald Trump's version of it. You read about it in the news. He's changed it to the Monroe Doctrine.
So crazy.
So, James, why don't you tell everybody what the Monroe Doctrine is?
Well, the Monroe Doctrine was basically James Monroe telling foreign powers in Europe that they were no longer allowed to establish themselves in the Western Hemisphere, that this was our territory. We'll stay out of your zone if you stay out of ours. And that was really the basis of it.
Yeah, and as simple as that is, it's, just like right now we're experiencing, with all the stuff that's happened at the time of this recording between things that have happened in Iran and then the Venezuela and basically telling Russia and all of them and like, hey, you got to stay over there.
Yeah.
We don't want you over here on our side of things.
Yeah. Even NATO and
NATO
there.
Well, and what's cool about this is it kind of set up something because we weren't yet all the way expanded to the Pacific Ocean. So this kind of justified, hey, this is our area to expand on.
Yep. You hit it nail right on the head with last of the founding father presidents. Right. And as I was doing some reading and research, it's now we're kind of into that growth mode.
Yeah.
Right. You have a individual who ventured outside of the original 13 colonies in Virginia and the East Coast and starts moving west. So you're exactly right.
Yeah, we're established at this point.
Yeah.
We've been through a lot. We've I guess kind of
fought the man,
drew the line in the sand, and so now we're kind of like on autopilot. I guess starting here. Of course, I don't know that America's ever been on autopilot with things.
Probably not.
There's always something going on.
Yeah. There's always a way to kind of evolve, and this is a president, an individual that was starting to take that next big step.
Yeah. So the Missouri Compromise, he was known for the Missouri Compromise. Missouri's request for statehood threatened to upset the balance between free and slave states. What would be considered, and I don't want this to sound wrong. Like, what is a thing today that was like the dividing thing that everybody's arguing about with like slavery? Would it be like immigration?
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my head. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Because it's crazy how like very few. I mean, everybody can bicker in politics and bicker with each other. The American people bickering with each other, and everything's usually fine. But there's always like 2 or 3 big ones that determines like if you're just like, I don't like this person.
Right. I mean, I think it's exactly like what we're dealing with the illegal immigrants and laws set up to become a citizen here.
Yeah, and the country's divided.
Right.
Very polarly divided.
Right.
On the right action to take. And just like it was with slavery, which led to this compromise. And, the cool thing is this compromise did give us a few decades of unity in the nation, but it didn't solve the problem. And that's what eventually, that issue is what eventually led to the Civil War.
That's right.
So this was like I look at this like a Band-Aid. It was a Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid, or also if history does repeat itself, if what happened with the Missouri Compromise is telling with what could happen with immigration here.
Yeah.
Who knows where we could be?
That's a really good point.
And people talk about Civil War now.
Yeah.
With all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean,
history repeats itself.
History will repeat itself, and honestly, I feel like we have been in Civil War for probably the past couple, probably since the 80s or 90s.
Sure.
It's been brewing.
Sure.
And we're in the midst of it now. Obviously, it has been violent in some.
Yeah, for sure.
In some scenarios, but I think that we are in somewhat of a civil war by ideology, and things like that.
Sure. And it doesn't always have to be war. It could be, families divided because of, a belief. I think we all could say we know people that have not talking to other family members because one position on politics, government, whatever it may be. So it doesn't always have to stem to war, but
Yeah, but it is a war of sorts.
it is a war
Yeah.
of sorts. Yeah.
You said that the Missouri Compromise was a Band-Aid on all of that, but like we talked about with Madison, is just kicking the can on down the road. And if we're doing as we do these president shows, because I don't know anything in between. Well, I didn't know anything at all, but I do know that by the time we get to Abraham Lincoln, I mean, we're on president number 5,
Right.
And all of this, I don't want to say it goes away to some degree after him.
No, sure.
So it's like all these other presidents have kicked the can down the road. Now, I may be wrong. Maybe something happened in between then, but I just don't know because I'm not like a historian.
Well, that's the best part of this podcast is we're going to figure that out.
Yeah.
We're going to piece it together.
It's like watching a fun series of
Yeah.
of the country.
Yeah.
Actually, a bad
No.
a bad series.
No, we're educating the millions of followers, which we forgot to say like and subscribe.
Like and
Yes.
subscribe. What do the kids say? Smash that.
Smash that subscribe button.
Yeah, do that. I'm not going to put like a finger with an arrow pointing to it because I don't know how to do all that.
We can do this.
Yeah.
It's down there below, like where the
Get the thumbs up.
description is. Yeah, smash that thumbs up. All right, so the Panic of Eight. Actually, what is this Adams Onis Treaty?
I didn't dive much into that. There was a grouping that
I
looked
can
a
help
little
us out.
Go.
I can help us out.
Well, before you educate all of us, because you're so much smarter than both of us
Thank you.
combined, I was going to save a lot of that because, I'm pretty familiar with Andrew Jackson's dealings with Florida, but go ahead, talk to us about this.
I'm very excited to talk about Andrew Jackson because he's a powerhouse and, he rose to fame nationally in the War of 1812 with the Battle of New Orleans, which actually took place after peace treaties had already been discussed. So he rose to fame then specifically in the military, and then he is going to Florida. He's supposed to be acquiring a couple, like overtaking Seminoles and escaped slaves who were perceived as a threat to Georgia. So he's just supposed to go to like 1 or 2 towns, and then he kind of goes rogue and keeps going and overtakes Pensacola. So it's like unauthorized military action that he's taking upon himself, which is wild, kind of cool, wild.
Yeah.
But it was unauthorized, so there was some backlash on that, and then like the president is having to decide: do I punish or do I reward? What do we do with this? But Andrew Jackson's actions helped the U.S. prove to Spain that they couldn't defend Florida accurately or well. So that is what led them to sign the Adams-Onis Treaty, which gave Florida to the United States. So I always think of this like Andrew Jackson single-handedly like overtook Florida and gave it to the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, add some details in there and that's almost accurate.
So he was not only just fighting or battling against the Spanish, but you mentioned the Seminole Indians?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. A lot of slaves at that point were escaping and heading to Florida just to hide out. And I believe the Seminoles were helping them, but the region was occupied by both Americans and Spanish, but technically it was a lot of Spanish territory.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So that was the Adams-Onis Treaty.
There you go.
Well, there you go.
And Jackson did not get punished.
Well, I mean, again, it's something similar in the news now.
Yeah. But it was very controversial what he did, and it, could have easily sparked backlash and another war because of what it was. But yeah, the government handled it well and used it to their advantage.
Yeah.
Never hear that often, that the government used something well.
No, but that speaks to that growth mode that we're getting out of, or getting into, getting away from just these 13 colonies. This kind of that the War of 1812 really sparked that we don't want to be any of these beliefs anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to form our own country.
Yeah.
It starts with the Louisiana Purchase.
And I love that with every president, we're identifying more who we are and who we want to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Fine tuning some things that aren't working and just progressing.
Sure.
This is probably what I got the most out of Monroe is his unanimous reelection.
Mm-hmm.
This is crazy to me, and I almost want to fact check Larry here, but Monroe won all but one electoral vote in 1820.
Yep.
I mean, that's pretty crazy.
I read that.
Well, because the Federalist Party had, disintegrated.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't an opposing party.
Yep.
Yeah. But I don't.
Well, yeah, I guess it
didn't look.
says the near unanimity symbolized a temporary dominance of one party rule.
Yeah, which was again part of that era of good feelings. There wasn't all this political polarization going on that we see in most presidencies.
Yeah. Strengthened U.S.-British relations, which at this time you would have never thought that they would be strengthening their relationships, considering all that had happened just years before. The Convention of 1818 set the U.S.-Canada boundary at the 49th parallel. Former enemies became stable trading partners. So things are kind of calming down around here. Cabinet of future presidents, which I guess we saw that with G-dubs, like with Madison, Monroe, and Jefferson. Monroe's cabinet included John Quincy Adams, John C. Calhoun, and William Crawford, which I guess William Crawford was a president, and I did not know that.
No.
I didn't even know who he
Quincy
was.
would be the next.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe he's
Quincy
the next
goes to
one.
6,
J.C.
right?
Adams.
Yeah.
I mean, it's technically it should be a Q, but Quincy, J.C. Adams.
Fair. I see where you're going. see it.
That might be good.
We'll spitball it and come back to that.
But it's interesting that it says here his administration incubated the next political generation, which I really feel like present day, I feel like Trump specifically got a lot of these younger guys in here, these younger people, because this could be like the next generation. I mean, I really feel like Marco Rubio is going to be president at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess only time will tell with who is set up through these parties, but but now it's just like I guess the idea is that when you have your vice president, you're picking your cabinet, you're trying to pick the future leaders as well as like, your own administration. But I'm sure as we'll see over the 250 years that, it'll be nice to be like, oh, well, he was the Secretary of State then. And as we pop through them. Absolutely. I think that's one of the issues with the world we live in today is because we don't have a lot of bright young
newbies.
Minds, right?
Yeah, it's the same people over and over and over, getting older and older in the system, and there's not the new fresh ideas coming in because it's the old class or whatever, just continuing to do the same thing.
And you can point it back to Monroe here of last of the founding father presidents.
Yeah,
it's time for a change.
Yeah,
it's time to get out. But you're right. To what you were saying, Tim, you have to have some knowledge.
Yeah.
Of the dealings, of the country and the world and policies and laws. And I mean, a lot of these guys are lawyers and such because they're wanting to write these laws that are still into place.
Yeah. I love the coupling of the older, wiser people working together with the younger, newer generation, pass along that wisdom, coach them as they're coming up in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. I think it was Monroe's uncle who got him somehow through being the wars and such, had connections with George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, got Monroe involved with Thomas Jefferson as kind of on the law side.
Yeah, he studied under Jefferson. Yeah. Because
So
after his parents died, his uncle kind of oversaw him and his siblings, and then promoted him getting that education.
Promoted and kind of guided too,
Yeah.
to get out of involvement with the military.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And get into the political side of such.
It says here is the last of the Virginia dynasty, which is kind of cool. And just like you said a second ago, kind of like the coming out of the founding fathers into the, like we got everything going and now go,
And I think that's cool because, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and we used to do field trips down to Fort Pitt, right at the pitch of the Monongahela, Allegheny forming the Ohio River. I mean, that's where the history there. That's their next move over. And then spending time in Cincinnati, it's interesting to see this progression, that it doesn't have to just be this East Coast.
Yeah.
Even though, Virginia, I guess Virginia is still kind of East Coast, but we have to expand.
Yeah.
We have to grow.
Yeah.
Lesser known things about J-Mo. He's wounded at the Battle of Trenton in 1776. Monroe was severely wounded during Washington's crossing of the Delaware campaign. The injury nearly killed him and left a lifelong remark.
Yeah, he had a severed artery in his shoulder, I believe, or shoulder neck area.
It's pretty crazy. Another less known thing is he was orphaned at 16.
Yeah.
Monroe lost both of his parents during his teenage years. He relied on mentors like Thomas Jefferson to advance politically. Early loss shaped his resilience and ambition.
Sure.
So he was good friends with TJ and J. Ma Shorty, and they were like his homies,
I think he said he started college at William and Mary at 16.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh.
And then he paused his education to fight in the Revolutionary War. Yeah.
We made this comment, I think, during the G-Dubs podcast about how, no, we did it in Thomas Jefferson about how, he wrote the Constitution when he was 33, and like how we're just couldn't even halfway get life figured out at 33. And it's just crazy, all these people. But I guess they didn't have brain rot back then like we all do. No. It's like you can watch TV. We grew up, we're kind of in that middle ground where, we can do with the technology or we can do without it. Mm-hmm. It's like we're in that middle ground there, so that we kind of know what it was like back then, and we kind of know what the future is, and we kind of teeter back and forth. But these guys didn't have TV to go and watch.
No.
They go to a theater and watch a play or something, or they'd find, they did.
But those things are more enriching for the mind.
Yes, they're more enriching for the mind, and this isn't happening all the time.
No.
Yeah.
It's like I talk about on this podcast all the time how I sit here and rot my brain and watch TV all the time. But it's like, that's why we're not as smart as these people.
Yeah, more sedentary of life of.
Yeah, well, our brain is not being exercised. Right. Like you're in school right now, and I don't honestly think that going to college is part of that. Keep your mind active and learning, and it's not necessarily, the content that you're doing is keeping your brain active and learning.
Yeah.
She can absorb all this stuff and, be good at it. And like, I just look at it, I'm just like, can hardly read anymore. I'm doing good to get.
We're happy with 1% better each day, and these guys are like 50% better.
It's funny. I had to sign something the other day, and my signatures. My name's Tim Hollis. Tim. I'm just like, my hand hurts now.
Oh my god!
It's like a scribble.
I don't ever write anything anymore because I always type.
Oh, yeah.
Like, my hand hurts.
Or hit Adobe and your signature's already in there.
But anyway, all that to say, the guy, them back then, they're just like, hey, we're working hard to set this up for idiots like me to do a podcast like this.
That's why we have founding fathers. They did all the work for us.
What am I contributing? I guess I'm kind of contributing to the, hey, people listen to this show.
We're
because
educating now.
Make yourself feel better that I'm an idiot and you're not. All right, this next one I thought was really cool. Served as Secretary of State and War simultaneously. So that's like the equivalent of saying he had Marco Rubio's job and Pete Hegseth's job at the same time.
Sure.
Well, I don't know how the hell you would ever do that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. That was out of necessity. I believe during the War of 1812.
Yeah. Well, a couple of the dealings. I have it right here. It was 6 years of it, but one of his struggles mentioned was getting people to join these the army and stay away from militias. It's kind of what with one of his downfalls was the inability to grow the army.
Yeah.
Which in turn was, caused his uncle to say, step back, let's focus on the law side of things.
Yeah.
And progressed him to eventually become president. So it is really amazing how these pieces all work together through these individuals.
Yeah, and I love the mentor status of the uncle in his life. You know, he's like maybe his Gandalf or something.
Gandalf.
It could be.
Gandalf influenced our founding fathers. All right. He supported American Colonization Society. Monroe supported relocating freed enslaved people to Africa. The policy remains controversial and complex in historical interpretation. I don't know if I read this in here, but did he have it? Did he have any enslaved people?
He did.
He
Monroe
did. Yeah.
He did. Inherited them.
He inherited some, but
Didn't
I
we
don't
talk
know
about
if he.
this with Madison? Inherited
Madison
them,
also inherited because Monroe's parents both died when he was a teenager, and he was the oldest sibling, so he inherited the property and the slaves.
Yeah.
And later, his uncle came to help oversee everything and guide, be Gandalf, but yeah, so. He did have some. I don't know if he acquired more after those initial
I don't think it was. From what I
inherited.
Gathered, he, Madison had the large acreage, the big 6,000 acres of farmland and land in general. I think Monroe had less, and he was gone more. One of the scandals we talked about at the beginning was being gone so long that the people overseeing his properties did not treat the slaves very well, which again sets up, for what we will see eventually down the road in, 60 some years with the Civil War.
Yeah. I thought it was fascinating that in Liberia in Africa, they named their capital after James Monroe because he was helping to set up that area as a settlement for freed slaves.
Yeah, that's cool.
So to this day, it's still called Monrovia.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
It is amazing.
That's why that's Monrovia.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, you're probably thinking like I saw Monrovia. I'm like, oh, that's the plants.
Yeah,
That's the place that
that's
makes the
plants.
plants.
I know what you're talking about.
I don't know
but
anything
then-
about plants, but
Then,
yeah.
then I saw was reading more about that. It's pretty cool that they did that and named that
Yeah.
after him.
And I think I think there's only 2 presidents with a city named after them, Washington, D.C., and Monrovia, which is just interesting because it's in Africa and it's named after him.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Wow.
All right. He had a strong executive experience before presidency, which I appreciate that. I'm not one of those people that are just like, oh, this president wasn't in the military. So, I don't care about that. But what I do care about is like having experience of doing things. It doesn't even necessarily have to be like a governor or senator or anything like that, but like, understand business and understand how to run things.
lead.
Trump doesn't have any experience in any of that, but he's a businessman,
Yeah.
which I'm completely fine with. There's been a lot of presidents that we've had, I know, at least in modern history, where, they didn't have all of these. Like it says here, Monroe served as governor of Virginia, diplomat to France and Britain, senator, cabinet member. And so, when you see somebody like that's got a lot of experience and they become president, well, that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
It's a good fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good fit. Let's see. He was his personal friendship with Jefferson and Madison. Like I said, I've mentioned this a few times on the show that I've been watching that show, The White House, and I think they portrayed this pretty good because Jefferson and Madison and Monroe were always like hanging out together, and they were friends on top of like in the politics and everything. And so yeah, it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah. And fun fact, Monroe and Jefferson, they were so close. Monroe actually bought the property right next to Jefferson's. And I can think it was one of multiple houses he had, but he did that. And then also there was a cool quote from Jefferson where he said that Monroe is so honest that if you turned his soul inside out, there wouldn't be a spot on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know. That's crazy.
Well, that's why it makes his scandals and controversy section kind of boring.
Boring. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
We'll get to all that, especially when we get around JFK and all that
Oh,
kind
man,
of stuff.
it'll get real good.
It'll get real good.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of tension between Madison and Monroe for a while, and then they had to become, their friendship had to be rekindled. you look at the University of Virginia, and you guys will probably see this in your trip, is as much as it's Thomas Jefferson, it's Madison as well.
Yeah.
So the relationship was a strong bond between Jefferson and Monroe. So again, these guys, and it makes you kind of intrigued with how we're going to see this portrayed in presidents to come. Where does that divide between what we know as Democrat and Republicans now? Where is that? Where does it stop having a relationship to help one another?
Yeah.
In a deeper meaning, right? In more political, not just on the surface for the news, but where does that stop? When does that stop? What president do we see doesn't transition very well?
Yeah.
So,
I think that there's always been a ton of tensions, like we've seen with politics and all the, smearing and all that kind of stuff. But I think that how we talked about with John Adams and was it John Adams and Jefferson, where they were like fighting with each other all the time,
yeah.
But then they were like, I guess you would say frenemies, or
later in years, right?
Later years, because they're stimulating each other's brains of like, here's my opinion on this, or here's my opinion. You could do that. And I think that that's happened all throughout history. I think that the divide like it is right now has just been in the past 20 years.
It could be.
But we'll see like where things started, like the Archduke Ferdinand moment of, when the politics started splitting everybody as we go through all this.
Well, it's going to be tensions. It'll be, the big tensions of, that the country, goes through. Is it around the Great Depression? Is it around the World Wars? Is it where do we see it? Is it right after the Civil War?
Yeah.
Right? So it's cool to kind of see where we're going to eventually get with this series.
The next one on here is just baffling to me that he died on July 4th. Monroe became the third president to die on Independence Day.
Third of the first 5.
Unbelievable.
3 of 5 presidents died on Independence Day.
Yeah.
And all founding fathers.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
How old was he? Do we know what his age was?
He was born, I think, in 1758.
Yeah,
I think it was.
Died in 1831. So
whatever that math equals, that was how old he was. I wasn't sure if he lived like a long time or
73.
Yeah.
So he would have been 73.
yeah.
Yeah, which back then I think that living to that long was, you're doing pretty good. Which president was it that lived really long? He was like in his 80s.
Was it Adams?
I think it was Adams.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Lived to his 80s.
All right, so scandals and
Oh, wait,
controversies.
no, I think the 80s was Madison.
Yeah.
Because he lived long enough to see people test his constitution and argue about it.
Oh, yeah. We learned that on the last one.
Yeah, Madison was 1751 to 1836, so that's 80s, right?
Yeah.
So the scandals aren't even that big. Missouri Compromise tension, the slavery debate fractured the illusion of unity, which, Andrew Jackson's Florida actions, debate over internal improvements, arguments erupted over federal funding for roads and canals, constitutional interpretation clashed with national development goals. That's not JFK boning Marilyn Monroe or anything.
No.
Yeah.
There was some scandal with, accusing Hamilton of some sex, issues and with extramarital affairs and such, but that's the worst that I could find.
Yeah.
Well, how come that didn't come up in our notes?
Larry didn't bring it up.
Larry's sleeping on the job.
I know. I need to probably readjust him. I mean, there ain't no TJ and Sally Hemming going on.
No. But and I think that maybe that's fine. Maybe that again,
that's fine.
It's refreshing.
It's a little bit. Yeah.
So the next section is the weird things, and I did think that this was kind of weird. It kind of makes you wonder like where his head's at. But he wore his military uniform on presidential tour. So Monroe consciously dressed in revolutionary attire during national tours.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I love his intentionality with it, and it did help give unity, but it wasn't even the most recent war.
But
which
I
is
know,
interesting.
But is it him trying to? Is it him trying to be like trying to get street cred for it, or hey, look at me, I serve, do all this? You remember that guy that was running against the guy in New York? You know, the guy that became mayor, Zamdani or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
The guy running against him always wore that beret, and he was like always in some kind of uniform.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
Well, I do remember reading that Monroe was more proud of his title as colonel than he was of any other title he had.
well,
So that could feed into that.
Jackson's tombstone said
Jackson's the same way, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's right.
But we'll discuss Jackson later.
Yeah, but it just seems kind of weird to me. Like he wore it during national tours, so that means he got up when he was about to go get in front of people and put this uniform on. Did he think that it made him look strong?
Maybe.
Well, I will say I think it did give him some street cred because he literally bled for the country and almost died for the country.
Well, yeah, and he deserves credit for that, but I just think that it's kind of weird if you're milking that.
Yeah, I think he was maybe doing that.
Maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but maybe in his mind he did it because, again, kind of one of his failures was the inability to bring the military together.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So maybe in the back of
That's
his
a good
mind,
point.
he's like, well, I have to show.
I have
that
to
I did
rally
this.
this.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
you
trying to
might
rally
be
it.
right.
Couldn't do it back then, but now as president.
That's some good insight.
That is pretty
what we're-
good. I feel like the reason that I guess my mind went straight to that is because I think about the other presidents, including him, they're just kind of nerds. They're kind of like in their thoughts, thinking, figuring things out, and so he probably wasn't good in front of people either, and so like maybe that made him feel more. I don't want to say powerful. That's a bad.
Well, it does say in the notes though that it reinforced patriotic continuity in the country. So
I think I'm going to go with what you said.
No, I think it's a combination. I think of everything, right? It's we're getting away from British beliefs. We're forming our own country here. We're going to start expanding. We're moving west. We're going over the Appalachian Mountains. We're seeing what's out there. It's a sense of pride, I guess. I don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's a combination of everything we just discussed there. What makes these guys unique?
yeah.
It's their leadership style. It's the inability to maybe lead, and then as a leader, you could never get that sense of failure gone. But then you are trying to rally the troops. You're going down and purchasing Florida, from Spain and such. It's probably a whole thing that.
Well, and we also talked about how he did. He kind of brought the presidential tour thing to the forefront, where he was touring the nation and getting in front of people a lot. And I don't know, maybe it just made sense.
Yeah. If he's doing tours and he's out in front of, Indian tribes, how do you let them know who you are?
Is he going to come into an Indian tribe and like wear their garb and stuff, wearing beads and stuff, trying to get in good with them? He's got like his feathers.
Yeah, this is how you get your feather in your cap.
Yeah, he's like, greetings. I'm J-Mo. J-Mo Sequoia.
J-Mo Sequoia.
All right, so like TJ, we learned with TJ, he had financial struggles. Wasn't it TJ that like gave or sold 6,000 books after everything burned for the Library of Congress? At least TJ's got that credit to him, but like it doesn't say anything here with Monroe. It's like maybe he just poorly managed his money.
Yeah, and had to sell his land off to finance stuff.
Yeah. Let's see. He lost a son in infancy, which I think a lot of these not just presidents, I'm sure just the general population, just because we didn't have modern science or modern medical science like we do now.
Sure.
And it wasn't just the son, it was his namesake. So the son's name was James Spence Monroe. So he had a daughter, then the son, and then the daughter. James Spence Monroe. So he gave his son his first name, and that Spence was his dad's first name.
How about it?
So it was like a double namesake, and he passed away. And I was like, oh, that's so sad.
That's a bummer. Yeah, you don't want that to happen.
No.
Let's see. He outlived most revolutionary leaders. Monroe watched the founding generation fade away. I think we've discovered that. Presidency as calm before the storm. His era delayed but did not prevent sectional conflict leading to civil war. So old J-Mo, what you learn is that all of them are necessary. All of them are a piece of history that we have to have. And when we look at it in retrospect, through the lens of what we've seen happen now, you can't imagine something happening any other way.
No.
To get us to where we're at right now. Because we're 250 years into this experiment, and it's still rocking and rolling. It's rocky, but it was rocky in the beginning.
Yeah. These founding fathers got the wheels in motion, right? You have to maybe put yourself in his shoes, knowing that he's the last of these founding fathers. Of the pressure or stress of where does it go from there?
Yeah.
The way their minds thought. I mean, that is a tough thing to have to kind of deal with later in life.
Yeah, but it's almost like all these guys were involved in the founding, and so it's almost like, all right, now it's my turn. Now it's my turn, and they're
the next step.
They're tweaking it and getting it figured out, but like Monroe is kind of like the end of it.
Yeah.
Now this is like this new generation of, all right, we spent the past all these years starting it from George Washington up to where we're at now. Hey, don't mess it up. It's kind of like, here it is now, like even now, hey, it's still not messed up. It's rocky and people disagree and all those things, but we live in the greatest country in the world. Freest.
Thanks to these founding fathers.
Yeah.
And all these rights that we have.
What do you think is the most notable things about J-Mo is?
Most notable? Well, you know how Andrew Jackson was kind of like wild and radical and did these crazy things? I feel like one of the craziest things that J-Mo did was, he was sent before his presidency to negotiate the acquisition of New Orleans for the United States. That's all he was sent to do. And he comes back and he's got the whole Louisiana territory.
Yeah. Well, he goes down there and Jefferson said, you got $10 million to get New Orleans. And he comes back and he said, I spent $15 million, but they gave me all of this.
Like they doubled the size of the country. He was supposed to get one port city.
Yeah.
And he doubled the size of the country. I'm just like, how did you do that? And then I think the same thing about Andrew Jackson was like, how did you do what you did? I don't understand.
It is amazing. It's funny you brought up the numbers because it said $5 million for Florida, which, in 2024 equated to $145 million.
Yeah.
So there's homes that you can go and buy in
I know
that costs more than what these guys were able to do to expand the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that, you go down with 10 million. I mean, because they were saying the reason that we got that back then in Louisiana Purchase is because Napoleon was, bleeding money and he needed cash to do all that. And, Monroe brought it home.
Yeah.
So that's a wild deal to do.
Yeah.
I can't even get clients to call me back. And he's dealing with Napoleon over the sea.
Well, it's like you mentioned in the last podcast, the more notable things that they've done a lot of times is, in other administrations.
Yeah, it was before or after their presidencies. In these founding fathers, most of their notable things that didn't happen during their presidency was prior to. What do you guys think is most notable with Monroe? J-Mo. J-Mo.
For me, it was going west.
Yeah.
That risk, not knowing what's out there.
Yeah.
Not knowing what you're going to encounter. You've known Virginia, Washington, Boston, New Jersey, Massachusetts, all that stuff. And the confidence in yourself to take that leap and see what's out there and see how we can make the country better.
Yeah. And I think the Monroe Doctrine was pretty bold.
Yeah, I was going to say that was going to be mine. Is the Monroe Doctrine is basically drawing a line in the sand, saying y'all need to stay over there. We can be friends, but y'all need to stay over there.
Yeah. That's why we're sitting here now.
Yeah, the Western Hemisphere is ours. Y'all keep it over there.
And it is interesting because, you know, in the notes it said he had a quiet personality in a loud political era, but it's like he was quiet, but he was bold.
Brave.
Yeah.
Well,
All these founding fathers were.
They were. So the next one, who's the next president? I still need to get my thing framed so we can see who the next one is.
John Quincy.
J
Quint.
JC.
JCA.
JC Ada.
Yeah.
JC Ada. Well, it'll be good to see as it all unfolds and what happens when we get out of the founding fathers.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Era.
Yeah.
But it's been fun. James, thank you for joining us
You're
on the past
welcome.
2 episodes.
I love exploring the development of our country.
It's very exciting.
You will be invited back. So
Hey, thanks.
all right. Well, thank you guys. See y'all on the next one.
Bye now.
Bye.
Like and subscribe.
Comment.